Yea, verily. Even to WLE World it was there, and you know exactly what this is about. That long, boaty, unmistakably American machine that defined a generation or three. It's not just metal and rubber and fake wood grain, it's a rolling time capsule, the station wagon. Now it's easy to say it's dead, and maybe that feels harsh, but when's the last time anyone saw a new American station wagon sitting on a dealer lot? Not a crossover pretending to be something it's not. A real deal, low-slung, three-row tailgate swinging wagon. Probably been a while, possibly decades, because by the time the 96 Caprice and Buick Roadmaster bowed out, the writing had been on the wall for a long time. Thing is, it wasn't always like this. In fact, rewind to 1976, wagons were thriving, selling nearly 1 million units in the US. That's about 10% of all vehicle sales. Let that sink in. 10 out of every 100 cars rolling off lots across America were wagons. And not just one or two models, 62 different ones. Two-door wagons, three-row wagons, hardtop wagons, jump seat wagons, rear-facing seats that made kids feel like they were on a reverse roller coaster down the interstate. All of it. It was normal. Ordinary even. You grow up in the 60s or 70s. Odds are your family had one. Probably fought your siblings over who got to sit in the way back. Feet swinging, face smushed to the glass making faces at the car behind you. This wasn't just a vehicle, it was the ultimate family machine. So what happened? To answer that, gotta go all the way back. Early 1900s, back when trains still ruled long-distance travel. See, the term station wagon wasn't metaphorical. These vehicles were literally wagons that worked around train stations, transporting people and luggage from depots to wherever they were headed. Early on, they were even called depot hacks. At first, they were just modified trucks. Throw some bench seats in the back, slap a canopy on top, boom, you've got a primitive people mover. But by the time Henry Ford came into the picture in 1910, of course it was Ford, things started to evolve. Ford began selling bare Model T chassis for about $700, which independent bodybuilders turned into station wagons. Not Ford's own wagons, mind you. These were local craftsmen shaping bodies out of wood to sit on top of Ford's steel bones. It was a win-win setup. Schools used them, hotels sent them to pick up guests. Even early government fleets got in on the action. These things were everywhere, filling in the transportation gaps that trains couldn't cover. And in a time when most roads were still dirt and dust, the ruggedness of a truck with the passenger space of a carriage just made sense. It was this scrappy, modular approach to car making that helped fuel the station wagon's rise. Nobody planned it. It just happened organically, like a need being met before anyone knew it was a market. And the demand? It kept growing. More companies popped up just to build wagon bodies. Towns had their own favorite builders. It was the Wild West of coach building. Even the railroad started offering shipping discounts to wagon manufacturers because demand was exploding across the country. It was the beginning of something big, something unmistakably American. A do-it-yourself blend of grit, utility, and a little bit of style. And in fact, back in 1909, there were over 550 car manufacturers in America. Not 3, 551. That's a lot of dreams and a lot of woodwork. But it wasn't until around 1929 that the station wagon as we know it really locked in. That year, Ford introduced the first official station wagon from the Big Three, a Model A with a full wood body. It looked upscale, felt exclusive, and carried that aura of prestige. Wood wasn't just functional, it was fashionable. Expensive, yes, but it gave these wagons the vibe of handcrafted luxury. Then came 1935, and Chevrolet threw a wrench in the wood party. They introduced an all-steel station wagon. No more varnishing, no more wood rot, just good old metal. Problem was, people liked the wood, liked the way it looked. It screamed high class, like the mahogany dashboard in a yacht. So the all-steel idea didn't take off right away. Meanwhile, Ford went even bigger. They built a dedicated station wagon factory up in Iron Mountain, Michigan, used timber from their own forest near Lake Superior. That's right, Ford was literally harvesting trees, crafting entire wooden bodies, and shipping them to assembly plants across the continent. Iron Mountain became a self-contained wagon kingdom. The factory had its own power, its own railroad spur, even its own housing for workers. Thousands of employees all focused on one thing: building the wooden heart of America's most iconic family vehicle. No outsourcing, no middlemen, just raw forest to finished frame under one company name. At the height of production, they were churning out entire wooden bodies at a dizzying pace. boxing them up and shipping them off to Dearborn, to Kansas City, to Long Beach, anywhere Ford was assembling cars. The process was so efficient, it bordered on obsession. Even sawdust was collected and used to power the factory's boilers. And let's talk about quality. This wasn't rough-cut timber slapped together. These were carefully selected hardwoods, steamed, bent, and varnished to furniture-grade finishes. The same craftsmanship you'd find in a dining room table was being applied to the family car. For many buyers, owning a Ford Woody was a status symbol, like having a front porch that rolled. But all that beauty came with a price. Weather, road grime, and sun exposure didn't care how nicely varnished the wood was. Without constant upkeep, the wood swelled, cracked, and rotted, and suddenly, that elegant-looking wagon turned into a maintenance nightmare. Still, for a moment in time, Ford had created something magical, a full-scale, forest-to-family assembly line that quite literally shaped American roads. But beautiful as they were, wooden wagons were a nightmare to maintain. The varnish had to be constantly reapplied, the wood joints inspected, and let's not even talk about the rot. Basically, owning a Woody was like owning patio furniture you had to drive. Then came World War II. The war halted car production, but when things picked back up, something changed forever. Willys, the Jeep company, introduced a game changer in 1946. The first all-steel family wagon. Still had the wood look panels, but underneath, steel, baby. This was the beginning of the end for real wood on wagons. 3 years later, Plymouth dropped the Suburban, another all-steel wagon, and it sold like hotcakes. Real wood started to vanish. Some companies kept the fake wood vibe going with vinyl stickers and trim, but from the late 40s onward, the future was steel. Then came the boom. Post-war America wasn't just rebuilding, it was exploding. The birth of the suburbs, the rise of the interstate, and of course the baby boom. Suddenly, families weren't small, roads weren't short, life wasn't quiet. And wagons were the perfect fit. A rolling room with space for everyone and everything. Throughout the 50s, wagons exploded in popularity. In 1950, they were just 3% of vehicle production. By the end of the decade, nearly 17%. That's not growth, that's domination. 1958 was the tipping point. In Plymouth's entire lineup, the best-selling body style wasn't the sedan, wasn't the coupe. It was the wagon. And these things weren't just cars, they were ships, land yachts. The 1968 Ford Country Squire stretched over 18 feet long. That's longer than a modern Chevy Tahoe. Your grandpa's wagon could swallow today's SUVs and still have room for baseball gear, groceries, and 3 generations of grudges in the back seat. Tailgates? Engineering marvels. Some dropped down like a truck bed, some swung out like a door. GM even came up with a clamshell design where the whole gate disappeared under the floor and roof. Pure wizardry. And then the third rows, not forward-facing, no, backward-facing. Reverse psychology seating. Kids got to stare at traffic while their parents enjoyed a moment of peace up front. And if they misbehaved, they were in full view of every angry driver behind them. Ultimate accountability. In the 60s and early 70s, wagons weren't just transportation, they were culture. Every family had one. Everyone recognized the silhouette. It was America's official vehicle of childhood. Marketing leaned in hard. Ford's Country Squire made every driveway feel like an estate. Chrysler's Town & Country played both sides, urban convenience with weekend getaway flair. Even the fake wood trim said something. It said, "You made it," loudly. Power was abundant. By the late 60s, you could spec your family wagon with a monster 400-plus cubic inch V8. These things could haul more than groceries. They could haul, well, you know. But then came the 1970s, oil crisis, emission standards, consumer habits shifting, the perfect storm. In 1970, wagons peaked at nearly 1 million sold, but cracks were forming. Wagons were expensive to build. Longer frames, more glass, more seats, beefier suspension, and despite all that, they weren't much more profitable than sedans. Then, October 1973 happened. The OPEC oil embargo hit. Prices skyrocketed. Gas quadrupled. Stations had lines around the block. Rationing kicked in, and big V8 wagons getting 10 miles to the gallon. They started to look like anchors. Sales plummeted. Chrysler bailed on full-size wagons in 1978. Ford and GM hung on for a while, but the trend was clear. Then came the death knell. Chrysler again, this time with something radical, the minivan. The Dodge Caravan and Plymouth Voyager redefined family vehicles, more space, shorter length, better mileage, sliding doors, easy parking, built on car platforms, drove better than vans, handled family duties better than wagons. And it wasn't just function, it was image. By the 80s, wagons were uncool, too square, too suburban, too much like what parents drove. And boomers. They wanted anything but to be their parents. The final punch came from SUVs, specifically the Jeep Cherokee, also in 1984, compact, four-door, off-road capable. And most importantly, it was a lifestyle machine. It said outdoorsy, even if it never left the pavement. Then came the 4Runner, the Pathfinder, and the Explorer. Each one chipped away at what was left of the wagon market. By the 1990s, American wagons were ghosts. Ford kept the Taurus wagon limping along until 2005. The Focus wagon made it to 2008. GM's Roadmaster hung on till 96. But that was it. European makers tried to keep the wagon dream alive. Audi Avants, BMW Tourings, Volvo Estates, they didn't call them wagons. That term had become radioactive. But Americans weren't buying, not in big numbers. In 2015, wagons made up just 1.1% of US sales. That's fewer than Ford sells F-150s in 2 months. And the irony? Crossovers, the SUV wagon hybrids, basically are wagons. CR-V, RAV4, Outback. All of them built on car platforms with hatchbacks and high roofs. But no one calls them wagons. That'd be social suicide, apparently. A few brave attempts were made. Cadillac's CTS Sport Wagon, gorgeous. Handled like a sports car, sold like cold soup. The Buick Regal Tour X? Same story, lasted 2 years. So what's left? Just memories. And maybe a few dusty third-row seatbelts tucked under a sagging cargo mat in someone's barn. What made wagons special wasn't the MPG, not the handling, not the looks. Let's be honest, many were bricks with wood wallpaper. What made them iconic was what they represented. Family, simplicity, a vehicle for life, not for lifestyle. A car that hauled everything without making a scene. They weren't statements, they were solutions. And now, everything's a statement. Crossovers and SUVs scream capability, even if they never leave the subdivision. They promise rugged adventures and command seating, whether you're climbing a mountain or a grocery store curb. But here's the thing, wagons were better at a lot of this. More efficient, more spacious, cheaper, and, oddly, cooler, if only because they didn't try so hard, they just worked. If this story brought back memories, or made you curious about a forgotten era of American motoring, do one thing: hit that like button. Share it with a fellow car lover.